Far out into the night sky lies a single flaming halo, a celestial body shaped like a torus of burning thorns, known by its followers as the Barbed Sun.
Alright, so today marks my first ever Shadowdark RPG video, and I thought what better way to kick off my Shadowdark content than with an entire player character class that I homebrewed from scratch. This class took me a couple months to make, but I wanted to get the balance just right, so I was going back and forth in the Shadowdark RPG Discord. I believe it's the Arcane Library. I'll put a link to that in the description as well. It's a great Discord if you want to get into Shadowdark, if you're not familiar with it. So, this class specifically can be slotted in to any setting. It comes with its own deity that you would be adding into your world because it needs this deity to function. But this deity's not really intrusive. It's not going to like kill your other gods or anything like that. It is more of an entity than a deity. This class comes from one of my loves for being a very, very altruistic player. It is the altruism class to the most literal extent. It sacrifices itself to heal others and damage enemies. So it uses HP as a resource. Now you may be asking, how is that going to work in Shadowdark when my character can sometimes roll a single HP at level 1? Well, I do have a fix for that. You can use most weapons that fit well with a cleric. So you can use clubs, flails, maces, morning stars, warhammers, and daggers. Flails are not a legitimate weapon in Shadowdark RPG yet, but I'm probably going to make one just for this class specifically. You cannot wear armor. That's a really big thing. So your AC is going to be incredibly low. You're going to get hit all the time, but that's sort of the point of the class. You are like the Flagellant from Darkest Dungeon. You want to be hit, you want to be punished, you want to be damaged. Your hit points are a D8, thankfully. I originally had it way lower, but I figured with how the class functions and it uses your HP as a resource, it needs to have a D8 hit die. So you do have a specific trait here, which is mentioning your deity. It is the Barbed Sun, and it mentions that you carry the holy effigy of the Barbed Sun used to mutilate yourself and channel your spells, which are basically miracles. We'll move into the second trait, which is Suffering Disciple. You know the Take Suffering spell, which is your healing spell. It doesn't count towards your spells known, and then while you're at half HP or less, you roll all con checks with advantage. So your spell casting checks for the Penitent count as constitution checks. So essentially when you are at half HP or less, you cast all your spells with advantage. So you are encouraged to take damage. Let's go to the third trait here, Endure the Lash. Now this class is trait heavy, I will say, but it makes sense, and you'll see why. Endure the Lash is a trait that functions only when you are at 0 hit points, and this is how we get around the really low HP in Shadowdark. This doesn't make you an unkillable creature, although you are a very hardy creature, in a very grotesque and disturbing way. So when you are at 0 HP, you stay conscious, and you follow the death timer rules. But all further damage or HP reduction is taken as con damage. And then obviously if you hit 0 con, you die. However, if you are stabilized in any way, you regain an extra 1d8 hit points. So normally when you stabilize somebody in Shadowdark, you just stop bleeding out, but you stay unconscious. With the Penitent, if you stabilize them, they actually regain hit points. So that con damage though doesn't go away. So if you keep going down to 0 and you keep taking con damage, you will die. So fighting vampires as the Penitent in Shadowdark is going to be a very scary thing, and they're going to be able to pretty much be able to kill you fairly easily. So you still have to play smart. Saintly Martyrdom. this is one of the core gameplay loop traits of this class. All of these traits are sort of required so that the class functions how I need it to. So Saintly Martyrdom is a thing that can trigger 3 times per day. It is when you are reduced to 0 hit points that it triggers. So you can see where the implied gameplay loop is sort of being given to the player. So you want to reduce yourself to 0 hit points. So essentially what happens is you get to choose one or the other. You can choose that allies other than you within near range regain hit points equal to your con score, which is the big number. And remember though, that goes down if you take damage at 0 HP, so you have to be careful. And then the other thing is you can make a DC 12 spellcasting check and instead damage a target within near equal to your con score. So you can either heal all of your allies or you can do a big bomb of damage to an enemy that reduces you to 0. That might be a little bit OP, I might have to tweak that a little bit, but this class is needed to be play tested still, so I can always change things, but this is just sort of, you know, I want people to try the class out, so that's why I'm making this video. And then they do cast spells, you will see. We will get into that though. I will go through the spells. I don't know if I'm going to go through every single one, but we'll go through some of them. Let's get into the talents now, because these are a bit interesting. These were hard to make because I wanted them to be interesting and evocative, but also very useful for the class. So your number 2 talent for a 2d6 chart. If you're new to Shadowdark, whenever you level up at certain intervals, I think it's every odd level, you roll on your talent table. And you start off at level 1 with a talent roll as well. So if you pick human, you get to roll on this thing twice at level 1. So anyways, Endure the Lash regains an additional 1d8 hit points for your number 2 talent. And that's actually very strong. So if you roll that a couple times, whenever you get stabilized, you're now going to regain 2d8 hit points, 3d8 hit points, 4d8 hit points. You're not a class that can self-heal. That is the only way that you're able to heal yourself. And you're going to see, it might sound really OP at first, but I'm going to show you that like this class can really easily pretty much reduce itself to 0 and might screw the party over. So it's a very chaotic class. The 3 to 6 roll is you get to roll your hit point die an additional time this level. Very useful for a class that uses HP as a resource. 7 to 9, you can either take +2 to your con, your strength, or you can gain a +1 to spellcasting checks. So it's a choice. Both are fairly useful depending on how you play the class. 10 to 11 is you get to learn an additional spell, always useful. And then 12 is always you get to choose the talent that you learn or +2 points to distribute to any of your stats. Very useful. Now let's get into how the spells are cast, because this is what is the most interesting thing about the class. So Penitent magic is more akin to miracles that are channeled through evoking the magic of the Barbed Sun. And we'll go over what the Barbed Sun is in a moment. So whenever you cast a Penitent spell, it always deals damage to you, regardless of a successful cast. Okay, so if you go to cast your spell and you fail the spellcasting check, you still damage yourself. Now you'll see each spell tier requires a certain amount of hit points in order to just cast the spell. So you are damaging yourself a lot with this class. So you actually play well with other clerics, which is kind of funny in a way. So your spellcasting checks count as con checks, and they benefit from the Suffering Disciple trait. And then obviously this just explains how the spellcasting works. On a failure, that works the same as any other class. On a natural 1, you have to complete a penance to cast your spell again. I stole that from the Seer class. So now let's get into what the Barbed Sun is. This is the extra deity that comes with the class. In order for it to function, you kind of need this, though you could rewrite the lore of the Penitent for it to fit into your setting, whatever it may be. So let's go over the Barbed Sun. Okay, so what is the Barbed Sun? The Barbed Sun is a celestial body that is shaped like a torus of burning thorns. The Penitents are part of a religion that I created called the Cenobites of Suffering. Now you might think, oh, that's like Hellraiser, right? So you're just like playing a Hellraiser character. Not really, but kind of also at the same time. I actually looked up what the meaning of Cenobite was. I thought that was a word that was specifically created for Hellraiser, but it turns out it actually means like a holy order. So they are called the Cenobites of Suffering. So if you play as a Penitent, that's what you want to tell your other players that you are, or the other players at the table. So, the Cenobites of Suffering hold that the burning halo is the wound at creation's center that birthed the universe, believing that every pang of suffering felt by mortal flesh is the result of said cosmic wound. To commune with the Barbed Sun requires one's own deliberate suffering. The faith's scriptures say, "Pour forth thy lifeblood, sending plea heavenward, and thusly 'tis heard, gifting in kind, healing or harrying, as it will." Devotees of the Barbed Sun wander the lands with scripture-inscribed bandages and torus-shaped scars that mar their bodies, carving and tearing their own flesh to kindle its miracles. Other religions feud over the followers of the Barbed Sun, dubbing them as cultists and madmen, but the Cenobites spare no breath for such arguments. So that gives you a whole lore tidbit on how you can take the Barbed Sun and throw it into your world. I tried to cover everything that would be useful to a GM and a player if you're playing the character. So, moving on from the lore, let's move into the spells. Alright, so if you have played Shadowdark RPG, you know how the spells known by tier table works. That just tells you what spells you know by level. But the Penitent Penance Table is what is important. So whenever you fail a spellcasting check with a natural 1, you have to do one of these based off of the tier of the spell before you can cast that spell again. And they get worse the higher up the tier of the spell is. So unlike wizards, your spell doesn't explode in your hand, but the Barbed Sun cuts off your access to that spell until you pay penance because you have angered it. So at tier 1, you have to spend 4 hours flagellating in isolation. You lose 1d6 max HP, and you stay at 1 minimum, so you can't kill your character with this. It returns in 1 week. You painfully brand yourself with the Barbed Taurus at tier 2. You lose 2 con for 2 weeks as the searing wound heals. At tier 3, you have to spend an entire day suspended on iron hooks, and you lose 3d6 max HP, you stay at 1 minimum, and it returns in 2 weeks, so that's a pretty bad one. For tier 4, you carve off a chunk of bone and you seal it in wax and permanently lose 1 strength. And for tier 5, you have to endure a week-long crucifixion on an iron effigy of the Barbed Sun. You lose 600 gold pieces for the materials and labor, and you lose 10 XP, 1d10 XP. So that one's pretty bad. You don't want to lose XP in this game because that's how you level up, obviously. Now let's get into some of the spells. I don't think I'm going to go over every single spell, but we'll just pick one out from each tier, and it'll kind of give you a feel for how the class functions. So in tier 1, I want to just go with the Take Suffering spell, which is the one that you learn as the Penitent just for picking the class. You learn this trait. This is sort of like the cleric's Turn Undead, where they just automatically know it. The Penitent knows Take Suffering in the same way. So Take Suffering is you spend X HP, which is any amount that you choose, and then you lose that much HP, but restore that much to another creature. So it's a sort of like Magic the Gathering, where you can spend X amount of mana to cast something. That's sort of how this works, except X is your HP. So if you have 30 HP, you can spend 29 and heal somebody 29, but you lose the HP for it. So That's a pretty cool spell. That's sort of like the core spell of the class. That's how you heal people. You have to damage yourself to heal people. And they have no self-healing spells. That's very important to notice. I mean. So let's go into the tier 2 spells here. I'm going to pick one out that I like a lot. We're going to go with Seek Guidance. Seek Guidance costs 3 hit points to use. You wound yourself before the Barbed Sun, and your blood pools into a shifting image. You can ask the GM a clear question about a danger, object, place, creature, person, or outcome, and your spilled blood pulls and forms a vague or symbolic image related to your query. HP spent casting this spell doesn't return for 1 week. So you can see that some spells have this little stipulation where the HP doesn't return, but on average, the Penitent spells are a bit more stronger than what a cleric would have because you're spending HP to cast it. And they do have damaging spells as well, so I'll do a second tier 2 spell just to show you. Wrath. This is a tier 2 Penitent spell. It's a focus spell, so that's like concentration in Shadowdark. So you have to roll to upkeep the spell every turn, and if you fail, you lose focus. Unlike in D&D, where if you get damaged, you make a concentration check. It doesn't work like that in Shadowdark. So, Wrath costs you 1d6 hit points a round to keep up. And how it works is you grievously injure yourself and you stoke the divine rage lingering within you for the duration. So while you're focusing, you may use your action to just deal 1d12 damage to something. Without an attack roll, you don't need to do anything else. You're just doing 1d12 damage. But you're taking 1d6 hit points worth of damage every turn. So everything is a gamble with this class. If you like to gamble, this is your class. Because a lot of it requires hit points. So now let's move into the tier 3 spells. Vow. This is a very interesting spell. It has a lot of different options for you to choose from. The tier 3 spells cost 1d8 plus 3 hit points to cast. So it's a minimum of 4 hit points. But you can damage yourself for 11. So remember, every spell cast is truly a gamble. You could reduce yourself to 0 hit points, although that's sort of what you want to do. You just don't want to completely obliterate your character by doing so. So with Vow, you choose a vow and maim yourself. The Barbed Sun doubles and mirrors your injury on your target. It takes 2d6 damage and it suffers the vow effect until it regains hit points. You lose the use of that body part until you regain HP resting. So that's very important. So you are sacrificing a piece of yourself to cast this. So you have Silence, which is you cut a tip off of your tongue. You cut the tip off of your tongue. The creature cannot speak or cast verbal spells. Sightlessness, you gouge one of your eyes out and the creature is blinded. Disarmament, you break your wrist. So you literally just can describe yourself snapping your wrist, and then that creature's both of their arms break, and then they can't use their arms. But snapping your wrist is going to really screw yourself over. You can only use that twice in a day, otherwise both of your hands are going to be broken, and you won't be able to hold weapons. Abasement. You break one of your femurs, and 2 of the creature's legs shatter, and it can only crawl. So, it does say that the creature heals that effect as if they restore hit points. So if there's an enemy healer, if it's a troll, anything that regains hit points, this is not going to be a good spell to use against those types of creatures, but it has its niche uses. So let's go into the next tier, which is tier 4. Let's do Transplant Torment. So Transplant Torment costs a minimum of 5 HP to cast, but it's 1d10 plus 4, so you could really do a lot of damage to yourself casting these. You embrace a creature with your effigy between you both. So you're putting your effigy on your chest and you're hugging something else. It takes damage equal to the HP you lost casting this spell, and then all of your temporary conditions, your diseases, your poisons, your burning, ongoing spell effects, and the like instantly pass to the target and end on you. So very like the Flagellant in Darkest Dungeon 2. You can absorb a bunch of negative effects from the party and then throw them onto another creature, which is a pretty cool play style if you ask me. I'm going to play this class if I ever get to play as a player character when I am not a forever DM, of course. So that's another cool spell, and we'll pick one more here to close the video off with a tier 5 spell. I'm going to pick my favorite tier 5 spell for the Penitent. This will be Final Sacrifice. Now this might be controversial, and I know some people are not going to like this, but I think it's a very amazing capstone spell. So what Final Sacrifice does is the cost to cast this spell is your life. You drive your effigy through your heart, and you gather a single corpse in a final embrace. The creature returns to life with your current HP, minimum of 1. You die in its place. The spell doesn't reform lost body parts or undo natural death. You do not die if you fail to cast this spell. Instead, you drop to 0 HP and you treat it as a critical failure. So you can end a campaign with one of the other characters die, and what better altruistic thing to do than sacrifice your own character to revive another player's. I think that's a really cool spell. Some people didn't like it in the Shadowdark Discord because it's a resurrection spell, but I like it because it's still a net loss. A character is still dying, which would be your character. So hopefully you guys like this class. If you want to try it out in your own Shadowdark games, this will be on my Patreon, link in the description. And yeah, thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed the class. There will be many more to come as I slowly reveal my Morvain setting, which is my Souls-like setting for Shadowdark RPG. I have been DM Dungeon Mastery. Thank you for watching. I'm not saying goodnight. I'm just saying. I'll catch you in the next one.